Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are taking a seriously dense, complex legal document and breaking it down into something you can actually use. We're looking at the Pakistan Public Procurement Rules of 2004. But look, we are definitely not just going to sit here and read you a legal text. We're going to treat this exact document like what it truly is, a high-stakes playbook. Literally, this is the ultimate rule book laying out the exact game for government contracts. We're talking millions, sometimes billions of rupees on the line here. And knowing the ins and outs of these rules, well, that's the difference between winning a massive contract and getting yourself banned from playing the game entirely.
So here's our game plan for today. We're going to cover 1. The ground rules, 2. Planning and advertising, 3. The bidding battleground, 4. Exceptions to the rule, 5. Winning and blacklisting, and finally, 6. Disputes and grievances. Let's get into it.
All right, part 1, the ground rules. Let's look at the foundations of the PPRA.
Before a single rupee is actually spent, we really have to understand the philosophical foundation of this entire system. To put it simply, public procurement is just how the government goes shopping. Whether it's paper clips for an administrative office in Islamabad or a massive multi-year infrastructure project, if it's a procuring agency of the federal government using public resources to acquire goods, works, or services, these rules apply. And honestly, what's super interesting is that this applies whether that specific agency is operating inside or outside the actual borders of Pakistan.
Now, the absolutely crucial point to remember is that every single rule we're about to discuss serves these specific core principles laid out in Rule 4. The government is legally obligated to ensure that any procurement is conducted in a totally fair and transparent manner, that it genuinely brings value for money, and that the process itself is both efficient and economical. If any specific action conflicts with these core principles, boom, it's a violation of the playbook.
And on the flip side, we have the exact opposite of those principles. Think of this as the list of sins, the explicit bad behaviors that the government is trying desperately to eradicate from the entire bidding process. The rules are crystal clear on what constitutes corrupt and fraudulent practices. We're talking coercive practices like threatening harm, collusive practices, which is when contractors secretly team up to artificially inflate prices and stifle open competition, corrupt practices, your standard bribery, fraudulent practices like intentionally misrepresenting facts to gain a benefit, and obstructive practices, which literally means harming someone to stop them from participating. Trust me, you absolutely do not want to be caught doing any of these.
Moving on to part 2, planning and advertising. Let's see how they actually announce these procurements.
So you might wonder, how do contractors even know what the government wants to buy in the first place? Well, the rules dictate exactly where you need to look to find opportunities, and it is entirely dependent on the financial size of the contract. For smaller procurements, anything over 500,000 up to 3 million rupees, the agency just has to advertise it on the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority's website. But once a contract crosses that 3 million rupee threshold, it's got to be on the website and published in at least 2 national daily newspapers, specifically one in English and one in Urdu. They're making absolutely sure there is wide visibility for those big-ticket items.
Once that advertisement is out there in the world, the clock starts ticking. To guarantee fair competition, the government is legally forced to give you a strict minimum number of days to get your response together. For national competitive bidding, you get a minimum of 15 days. For international competitive bidding, which naturally takes way more coordination, that minimum jumps to 30 days. The literally only time they can bypass this clock is during a declared emergency where suddenly no time limit applies.
All right, Section 3, the bidding battleground. It's time to actually submit that bid.
Now we are entering the main arena. Let's focus heavily on how a contractor qualifies and submits their bid for one of these advertised opportunities. Under Rule 20, open competitive bidding is the default setting of the entire playbook. Basically, unless there's a highly specific legal reason not to, the government wants to cast the widest net possible. They want as many qualified bidders as they can get competing against each other. Why? Because open competition naturally drives down prices and pushes up quality.
But wait, how do you stop the government from just picking the cheapest, lowest quality junk out there? For complex bids, they use this brilliantly clever workaround called the single-stage 2-envelope procedure. So as a bidder, you submit one package, but inside that package are 2 sealed envelopes. One has your technical specs, and the other has your actual price tag. The agency opens the technical proposal first, totally blind to the cost. Only after they decide if your product or service actually meets their strict quality standards do they finally open the financial envelopes of the accepted bids. It completely separates quality evaluation from cost evaluation, which is a total game changer.
Which brings us to Section 4, Exceptions to the Rule. Let's talk about alternative methods.
Because let's be real, what happens when the government just doesn't have the luxury of time or a wide-open market? We can contrast the standard open method we just talked about against alternative methods like negotiated tendering. This is a super rare pathway, reserved strictly for genuine emergencies, events completely unforeseeable by the procuring agency, where they literally do not have 15 or 30 days to sit around and wait. It can also be used if there is literally only one supplier in the entire world who holds the exclusive intellectual property rights for what the government needs. I mean, you can't really have an open competition if only one person on Earth owns the patent, right?
Now, what's really fascinating here is this excerpt from Schedule I of the rules. It shows exactly how critical commodities, stuff meant to fix urgent demand supply gaps in the country, can completely bypass those standard timelines just to keep the country running. Take a look at the bottom row for LNG and LPG. Instead of a 15-day waiting period, the minimum response time from the advertisement going live is a blistering 24 hours. When the nation needs energy right this second, the playbook adapts to allow for extreme speed.
Of course, there are also exceptions for the small stuff. For smaller, everyday needs, the rules provide these specific financial thresholds to speed up the process without bogging everything down in endless red tape. If it's considered a petty purchase, so under 100,000 rupees, the agency can just grab a single quote and issue a purchase order. Done. For things between 100,000 and 500,000 rupees, they can use a request for quotations, where they just need a minimum of 3 quotes from registered firms. So no massive newspaper ads or 15-day waiting periods required for the basics.
Section 5. Winning and blacklisting. The outcomes and the penalties.
We've reached the climax of the life cycle, finding out who actually wins the contract and who gets exiled from the game. For years, the gold standard was simply picking the lowest evaluated bid, but the absolutely crucial point here is that a recent amendment completely changed the winning standard to the most advantageous bid. Guys, this is a massive shift. It means the highest-ranked bid isn't necessarily just the cheapest one anymore. It's evaluated on a holistic combination of cost, quality, and qualification. The government is no longer legally forced to just grab the cheapest option if the quality is terrible. They can finally prioritize true value for money.
But on the flip side, if you win and then you break the rules, the penalties are devastating. If you're caught engaging in those corrupt and fraudulent practices we discussed earlier, you're looking at being blacklisted for up to 10 years. Failing to perform your contract or breaching it gets you up to 3 years, and failing a bid securing declaration is up to 6 months. But here is the real kicker. If you get blacklisted, you are instantly designated as cross-debarred. That means being blacklisted by one single agency instantly bans you from bidding with all government procuring agencies. Game over. Your business with the federal government is effectively done.
Finally, Section 6, Disputes and Grievances. How to handle complaints.
So what happens if you played totally by the rules, but you feel the government didn't? Let's look at the legal safety net available when a contractor feels they've been cheated or unfairly evaluated. Every single procuring agency is legally required to have a Grievance Redressal Committee, or GRC. This is basically a rapid response team made up of an odd number of people, oddly numbered so there's never a tie vote, which is pretty smart, and they're designed to settle disputes before a contract officially enters into force. They have a strict mandate to investigate and decide upon any complaint within just 10 days of receiving it. However, as a contractor, you are held to an incredibly tight timeline if you want to formally challenge a decision. If you've got an issue with the technical evaluation, you only have 7 days to lodge a complaint. If you have an issue with the final evaluation, you have a mere 5 days. And if the GRC actually rules against you and you still aren't satisfied, you have 30 days to file an appeal directly to the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority. So you really have got to move fast.
And this accountability goes both ways. If the government agency itself fails to follow this playbook, say they skip the advertising timelines, or they use the wrong bidding procedure entirely, or fail to evaluate based on their own stated criteria, the entire process is legally labeled a misprocurement under Rule 50. It totally invalidates the process and holds the agency's feet to the fire.
After walking through this incredibly strict step-by-step life cycle, you can really see the tightrope the government is constantly walking. On one hand, you have these highly rigorous rules designed specifically to eliminate corruption, ensure transparency, and find the most advantageous bid. But on the other hand, every single rule adds time, complexity, and administrative burden to basic everyday government functions. So I'll leave you with this profound question to ponder regarding the reality of government spending. Do these rules actually strike the right balance between preventing corruption and just bogging down the government in endless red tape? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning how the complex systems around us are built.